What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to 6.4. We're doing a little imperialism in Central America. We talked about imperialism in South Asia, aka India. We talked about imperialism in Sub-Saharan Africa, specifically in the Congo and South Africa. Now we're going to do a little in Central America. This is 1750 to 1900, but really this video is going to be really on like the mid-1800s through the 1900-ish. Let's rock and roll. So a little contextualization. I know you know this already. I don't even know why I have to tell you because you're super smart, because why wouldn't you be? But I'll give you a little review anyway. So if you forgot about this, Latin America in the period of 1450 to 1750 was under the control of the Spanish primarily and a little bit of the Portuguese, which is Brazil. In the 1800s, as a result of the Enlightenment, unequal social classes, as well as the colonial rule system, the people in Latin America rebel, and they rebel successfully, and they overthrow their government. However, they do not create a society that was completely equal. Essentially, the Peninsulares, who under Spanish rule were at the top of the social class pyramid, Peninsulares being people born on the peninsula or born in Spain. The Creoles, who were full-blooded Spanish, but born in Latin America, overthrow the Peninsulares and basically keep a lot of the same social system, but just put themselves in control and create essentially a democracy, but not everyone can vote. So we kind of have this fake democracy, similar in the United States at this time, where only white landowners could vote. It's similar here, where only the people who are wealthy and own land could participate in the democratic process. The attempts to unify Latin America into one country, which was Simón Bolívar's dream, fails as being unsuccessful, and we essentially have a lot of little countries that break up in this area over the course of the 1920s, or the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. In terms of politically what's going on at this time, we're talking 1850 to 1900, imperialism in Latin America is a little bit different than imperialism in other parts of the world. Latin America during this time is not actively conquered like Africa is, or like South Asia is, or like we see in Southeast Asia. We don't see that same conquering through force. Instead, we see what is considered to be kind of economic imperialism. I want to kind of show you how this plays out. Politically, the United States government considers themselves, and this is a little ethnocentric here, but they consider themselves the protector of the Latin American people. They essentially tell Europe, you guys got kicked out in the 1820s. We don't want you back here. And the U.S. will protect the Latin American countries. Again, the U.S. isn't what the U.S. is today in terms of a top global power. They're really just an upstart country, but they have this sense of purpose, I guess, where they feel that they're the protector of the Latin American people. No reason to say why, but they do. The U.S. is not going to imperialize them, nor will any other European country imperialize Latin America. But the U.S. is going to, in the 50s, 1850s, 60s, and 70s, as the U.S. industrializes and gains a lot of wealth and power, they are going to heavily support leaders in Latin America who support the U.S. business interests. So if the leader supports the U.S. business interests, U.S. businesses and the U.S. government funnels money into Central and South America for those candidates and for those people, and therefore the U.S. interests are benefited in Latin America. The interest of the Latin American people is not of the U.S.'s concern. Our concern as a U.S. government would be simply to make sure Latin America is under our rule and doing what we want. Most of the governments in Latin America are going to be very, very corrupt. And pardon my Spanish pronunciation, but there's going to be single caudillos who are going to be the people who rule. These are essentially like, they're elected, but they're elected through like force and like corruption and like stuffing ballot boxes and like having their kind of henchmen or thugs go around and like, so it's almost like, hey, we support, you don't support me, but I'm going to make you support me at the ballot box, and I'm going to force people to kind of vote for me on my behalf. Most of the elections are going to be rigged, and freedom for the people in these countries are going to be severely limited. So it's not true Enlightenment ideas. We have a ton of corruption and people kind of skimming money off the top and like not letting that money and like the benefits of the government kind of pass down to people in the middle class and lower class. The U.S. is okay with this. We are like, it's fine as long as you're serving our business interests. So we're going to see a ton of corruption. I just put out, I just wanted to show you these kind of couple people. This is the leader of Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, And I'll move myself up here. Here's the leader of Ecuador. These are all people who are pretty much ruling in the mid to late 1800s. You'll notice that some of them have very long, we got like an extended period of time for these guys. I also just want to point out how they look. These are not people, well, let me bring myself back down here. These are not people who have any native blood. These are very European looking people. And we see that the impact of government is still controlled just by these pictures, still controlled by the Creoles. And all of these people, you can just tell by what they're wearing, are all military elites who kind of rule the government in a similar way as the military does. Economically, there's no more mercantilism here. However, the Latin American countries are still relying on trading one or two specific raw materials with industrialized countries. So Latin America is not industrialized. They're going to take their raw materials, sugar, copper, fruit, it could be timber, and we're sending it to industrialized countries who are going to use that stuff and then bring it back. So it's not mercantilism anymore, but we're still using the same mercantilism system. Like Guatemala doesn't have to trade with Spain, they can trade with whoever they want, but they're not industrializing their own country, so they're only relying on raw materials, which is going to put the power and the money in the hands of the industrialized countries, specifically the closest industrialized country to them, which is the United States. There are going to be some multinational countries or companies. These are companies, again, if you forgot from earlier in imperialism, these are companies that are throughout different nations. They're multinational. These multinational companies are going to buy cheap land in Latin America and create large plantations, not slave plantations, but plantations to grow these raw materials. So they're going to buy it at a cheap price. They develop the land, and then the company makes the money off the land. And because they're primarily based in the United States, the U.S. makes a lot of tax revenue, and the U.S. likes it. And the strong caudillos are okay with this happening because they're gaining power and they're going to oppress their people. So around and around we go in that way. The United Fruit Company is one example of a multinational company. You can guess what the United Fruit Company is going to produce. Fruit. Specifically, they're going to make banana plantations in Guatemala, and they're going to build railroads as well to transport these bananas. However, this does not benefit the Guatemalan people because it's not a Guatemalan business. It's a U.S. business, and the U.S. company owns this land, so they make the money. Again, the money's coming back into the United States. Now, they're employing Guatemalans, but they're paying very minimum wages, so the Guatemalan people aren't benefiting. The United Fruit Company refuses to build highways because they want to control transportation. So, for example, then what I'm trying to point out here is in Guatemala, they're not benefiting from this at all, and it's leading really to poverty in Guatemala, and a lot of these issues still exist in Guatemala into the 1900s and even into the 2000s. So they don't build highways, so you can't transport. The United Fruit Company said, we want to control the transportation so that way we can charge people money to use our railroads, so we're not going to allow highways to be built to transport goods through eventually cars. We're going to make sure it's trains and that we control everything. So that's how economic imperialism works. So we're not conquering them politically, we're not taking them over, but we are really kind of dominating the local economy and making money for the United States. Lastly, kind of one other example of this is the Panama Canal. So prior to the Panama Canal, Panama is in Central America right here. This is a kind of a zoomed in area, part of it. This is the Bay of Panama, which will lead you to the Atlantic. This will lead you, the Bay of Panama, which leads you to the Pacific Ocean. This will lead you to the Caribbean Sea and eventually the Atlantic. So instead of having to go all the way around South America, if you wanted to transport goods by boat to New York City, now we're going to build this canal to kind of cut through and cut the distance in more than half. It was originally started by the French. It's eventually finished in 1913, I believe, by the United States, and the U.S. is going to control the Panama Canal and make money off the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is not going to be returned to the Panamese people, doesn't sound right, until the late 1900s. And the U.S. is going to make money off of charging people tolls to go through this canal, which is going to be very profitable because if you're a ship, you're willing to pay the money to go through the canal because it's going to save you almost 8,000 miles in your journey, which costs money, fuel, people, all that stuff. So that's what I got. Theme here overall is in Latin America, it's going to be a lot of economic influence, especially from the United States, and it's going to leave local economies in Latin America poor with corrupt governments, but it's benefiting the United States, which is in turn imperialism. That's all I got. You got any questions, you write it down, you let me know. You know what I'm going to say.